Okay, I'm actually making this as a separate video. If you haven't already seen the video in which I said I was going to make this the ending to that video, then I suggest you see it. Maybe after you see this one, because the two really aren't related. Now, one thing that I really want to talk about is the war in Iraq. Yes, or rather the US occupation of Iraq, because I don't really know if it counts as a war. The United States occupation of Iraq. I know it's something that a lot of people have been talking about for about 5 years, since the war started, almost 5 years. And it's something that I haven't talked about, and that's something that I really look forward to talking about in the future. I suppose, well, I really don't have much to say about it, except for what I'm going to address right now. Now, a lot of people who are opposed to the war, one thing that they very often cite as the reason for their opposition is that the death count of American servicemen, American military servicemen. It's right now at around, I think, 3,800, 3,800, something like that, something around that, a figure around that area. And that is something that people use a lot. And when I say people, I mean like, let's say, media personalities, political commentators, people who write it on their blogs and do videos about it, just stuff like that. It's one of the very big points of people who are against the war. And now, I'm not saying that that isn't a significant number, but one thing that they generally either omit entirely, or don't address, or get around to addressing kind of as just a little supplement to that, is the Iraqi civilian death toll. You know? And this is something that really boggles me, that this is something that they wouldn't talk about when... It's like something that, even if they do relate it, they never put priority to it, they never emphasize it as much. And what's interesting there is that actually, although there hasn't been a definitive official count of Iraqi civilian deaths relating to the occupation, there have been various different estimates, and it's generally estimated in the 10,000s. And I'm not just saying like 10,000, 20,000, I've seen around 50,000, I think. Maybe let's say a little bit less than that. Let's say even 40,000, 30,000. Don't you think that's meaningful? I mean, I'm not saying that you should give priority to any one group. I actually think that it's a very bad thing to put priority on the lives of one group of people as opposed to another group of people. But that's actually what's happening right now. You have priority being given to the American servicemen, which is almost the opposite of what makes sense. I mean, if you're going to give priority to someone, wouldn't it be the Iraqi civilians? I mean, think about it, comparing it, you have on one hand a group of people who volunteer to be active members of the military of an imperialist country, as opposed to, on the other hand, you have a bunch of people who never really wanted to do anything to be involved in a military conflict, who just happened to be sitting there when a big war broke out, and most of them, or a good deal of them, ended up being killed. I mean, when you think about it, it's almost as though I don't want to say that the death of people who are involved in the military servicemen, is justified or justifiable. That's actually really almost the opposite of what I want to say. But when you think about it, it's almost as though... How do I put this? I'm tempted to use the term "one foot in the grave," but I'm not going to, okay? I'm not going to use it, although I kind of just did. Also, there's something else that I want to address very quickly, and that is, overall, in America, people generally have this kind of concept of military service being a very noble thing, a very, kind of almost a old-fashioned concept of military service being like one of these brave, noble things for a person to do. And this is even from people who are very anti-war. One thing that you hear a lot is just in general from people who are opposed to the war. A phrase that's gotten to be very popular is "support the troops, not the war." And in a way that sounds good. It's like, and I could say that in a way I agree with it, in that I don't wish any harm to American servicemen, or any servicemen. But in the end, what does that really mean? To what extent do you support the troops, or can you support the troops without supporting the war? And I guess what I'm saying here is that it's almost like, how can you support the military whilst being opposed to military? It's just overall, there's this concept that military service is a wonderful, brave, noble thing, when at the same time America is really a very military-oriented country, just culturally. And you have a lot of people who say, like, support the troops and everything, which, again, I agree with to some extent, in that I don't wish them any harm. Whereas at the same time, you have America, which has generally been the aggressor in most military conflicts over the past, let's say, 100 years. Since America started getting involved in international conflicts, it's generally been, you have all of these wars since, let's say, maybe the Spanish-American War, which is really the original occupation of Iraq. Generally, during the Cold War, all those things, Vietnam, Korea, all of those things were generally not defensive military actions. That, if there were a draft, let's say, maybe then it would be a bit different, because you would have people who didn't actually choose to become a part of the military, and who were drafted. But it's almost ridiculous when you have Anyway, on an entirely different subject, we're probably going to save a different subject for another video. Thank you, good night, and etc.